Welcome back to the People and Purpose podcast by GMG. My guest today is Carl Masterman, president of our sports division at GMG. We're here today to discuss a very important and interesting topic covering the tactics and strategies in the sports game. Welcome, Carl. Good morning. It's lovely to have you.
Morning, Razan. Likewise.
Carl, today we have quite a few topics to cover that I personally find extremely interesting, considering that sports in general has become part of our human nature, whether it's for well-being, whether it's a passion subject. Historically, it's been a very emotional touch point for all. And now we're talking about it from the lens of business. My question, I think, for you today, as we start, is how did you venture into this market? How did you get into the sports retail industry? Was this a specific aim you had to say, I want a career in sports? Or was this simply something that landed in your face that you then became passionate about?
So, yeah, an interesting question. It was absolutely, it landed in my face. So I go back to when I was 19, and I was very fortunate, unlike many of my peers, because we all know it's a difficult age at 19. Not everyone knows what they actually want to pursue in their career. So I started working in one of the retail sports stores in Cape Town in South Africa. 19, fresh at the footwear wall, and that's where I started. I started selling sneakers at the footwear wall. But it was that moment that I knew that this was definitely an industry I wanted to continue with. And it really comes down to three important phases in my life. One was 19 and stepping into the sports industry at the entry level. Then, to be fair, Dubai played a very important role because, in 2005, I relocated to Dubai. And the reason for that was knowing that I was ambitious about this particular industry. The retail landscape back then was very different. You didn't have Mall of the Emirates, you didn't have Dubai Mall, you basically had, I think it was Deira City Centre,
That was a big one.
Burjaman. But you really could feel the commitment of what Dubai was going to do. The aspirations was to become the shopping hub of the world. You look at 2024, last year, Dubai Mall, 105 million visitors. So it certainly achieved that. So I really found myself in the right place at 23. And then the third thing was the organizations that I worked for. I was young, dynamic, ambitious at that stage and found myself in organizations that, rather sort of tamed it, actually empowered it. So I grew very well with the company's growth. Being GMG, of course, been with them for 14 years. And that really has been a big part of my career.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you are facing, and how do you feel that you can navigate around them?
I think definitely one of the biggest challenges is, for me, it comes down to two things. One, I'll use one word, simplicity. I think that for and maybe not just in our industry that we specialize in, across, people can relate to this. We tend to complicate. And I think one of the biggest focus areas for us is how do we simplify? You bring something in 15 steps, how can we do it in 5? Yeah. There is a huge demand now to simplify. The other thing I would say is really collaboration and communication. If you look at our organization, if I go back to when I first joined, we were operating out of one geography. Today we're in 13 geographies, close to 80 cities. That creates a whole different complexity when you talk about collaboration and communication. So the organizations like ourselves, how we've evolved with building corporate communication functions to really make sure that we bring that synergy and that consistency. And then the collaboration part is, it's not just within my respected team, it's about cross-functional. And I think the organizations that's going to continue to thrive are the ones that really know how to bring that collaboration. And it sounds easier than said than done, we know. I find one of the biggest things that slows us down is poor communication and poor collaboration. So I would say those are the two areas, simplicity and collaboration.
Do you feel that the trending topic of diversity, equality, and inclusion plays a role in this dynamic of geographical expansion? Does this add an extra level of complexity, or do you feel like it just naturally sits into the flow of adapting to different cultures?
No, I think massively. It's hugely critical. Massively.
Yeah, that's why it's the trending topic.
If you look at, we're very fortunate. We're fortunate in the sense of today we have so much reliable data that can tell you that, it's about awareness, first of all. Organizations that don't bring the awareness backed off the data that demonstrates that in the absence of diversity, in the lack of inclusion, you're going to slow down innovation, creativity. And I think also, I've had an interesting journey the last 3 years because we've expanded into Southeast Asia, Hong Kong. And often you realize the importance of inclusion, because often I can be conducting a meeting, and in some cases I have to be mindful in terms of how I present myself in that meeting. Equally, if I look at my strategic leadership team, we talk about equality in the workplace. I'm very unbiased about the gender piece. I believe that ultimately we've got to empower the right talent. Taking that into account, if I look at my three global strategic leaders, they are empowered women in the roles. And it's not about the fact that they're women; it's the fact that they're the right talent for that role. And I think that's a huge step in the right direction. It wasn't like that when I first joined in 2010. We've come a long way with that. And I believe that that's something that is going to be more demanding in the workplace.
100%, because I also think that different geographies have different perceptions or level of advancement in how the subject is translated into their businesses. Lately, there were quite a few topics on how businesses are adapting to that within their own scope. You go from countries like Saudi Arabia, where it was fundamentally a male dominated industry, suddenly opened up, to going to Asia, where women are genuinely massive leaders, like you've mentioned. So it's always an interesting one to see how we evolve as the company grows and how much an organization can adopt those, because they're still part of the cultural change. But considering in the world overall, DEI is a big subject today, it's interesting to see the evolution. I think everyone in their career have an impact that happens, a memorable moment that has impacted them in a way that shapes how they either think or how they regard their career. Have you had one of those? And if you did, please share if you don't mind.
I mean, I've had a few, but I mean, one that immediately comes to mind. I mean, I definitely celebrate the fact that I'm in this role of president of global sports, but I started in the stores. For me, that is it sets a very good example in terms of, look at our organization, for every one of our frontline team members. That for them becomes aspirational, and I have to really lead by that example. But to take that into how that became an achievement, as we move up the hierarchy, our responsibility to create the next level of leaders and mentor the next level of leaders becomes hugely important. So if I look at our organization in GMG, if I go back to 2010 when I first joined, the fact that today we can recognize that we had 3 store managers in 2010, that today, if you ask where they are in 2024 in our organization, well, one's the vice president in our food business, our food retail organization. Another's a vice president of our healthcare business, and the other one is a vice president of our Nike Middle East North Africa business. So, how many organizations today in 2024 in the last 14 years can celebrate that we've taken store manager levels and we've developed them and nurtured them and taken them on this journey of our growth strategy, but they've grown with the company. And my involvement of being able to mentor in any shape of that, for me, has been one of the highlights of my career, for sure.
Definitely, no, I can imagine. How do you approach decision making when it comes to major milestones within the business?
Well, the first step is, there's a reason why you have subject matter experts around you. So the first step for us is making sure, once again, it comes back down to collaboration. It's ensuring that we have the right team talents around us to really start making those decisions. The other one is data. I mean, today we're operating in a world of data. If I look at my career from when I started to now, the kind of data we have access to give us high levels of confidence to make the right decisions. I mean, you look at GMG Sports, for an example. I mean, in the last 4 years, we've gone into so many different geographies. In the absence of data, there's a high risk that you can often make the wrong decisions going into these regions. Okay. So for sure, I mean, those are some of the big milestones, going into Egypt over the last 4 years, going into Southeast Asia. And a lot of that has been down to the due diligence and what we've leaned on in terms of data. So I would say one is obviously making sure you have the right subject matter experts, listen to them. And the second one would be really back that and validate them with data.
You mentioned earlier how you see yourself as an inspiration for those in stores as well, because I'm sure they would also look up and believe that they can one day have the journey that you have had. If you were to give them a piece of advice, not just within GMG, but for themselves as individual to aspire to grow their career, what would that be?
Never lose sight of the importance of people. For me, it always comes down to people. I think in every capacity, whether it be obsessing the consumer, people, whether it be working cross-function, recognizing the importance of collaboration, people, whether it be about mentoring, motivating, developing talent, guiding talent, developing talent, people. So for me, the number one priority, I would say, in any member of my team in the stores, never lose sight of the importance of people, never lose sight of the importance of how to manage, motivate, and how to lead people. For me, that is ultimately been, personally for me, that's been something that I've always recognized is important. And the other one is, and that's for anybody, not just in the stores, for anyone. For me, I believe that EQ is going to start to outweigh IQ. I don't disregard the importance of IQ, but definitely, the emotional intelligence piece is going to be more demanded, especially when you start to look at the new generation of talent coming into organizations. It's going to be even more demanding in terms of, really how you're basically able as a leader to demonstrate empathy, for example.
100%.
Empathy is going to become far more demanding in leadership roles. So, to the young, aspiring, ambitious talent out there, in stores, for example, in our organization, I would honestly say that's something that is going to be very demanding for the future if they want to evolve with companies like GMG.
Well, it's no secret that GMG is one of the largest sports player within the geography within which we operate. Do you believe that as a key player, we can define the landscape of sports? And how do you believe that we can do that?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, if I look at, the commitment of GMG and their strategy around how they're looking at expanding across the different regions, it stems from a confidence of we are proud to partner organizations. So, we have been a distributor and a retail partner of Nike for over 40 years. We've also created our own homegrown concepts, Sun and Sand Sports, for example, that's very family consumer focused. Today, if you look at where we are today, Sun and Sand Sports, while it started very humbly in Dubai, is now across representing 10 countries. We've also understood that, we talk about inclusivity, we talk about diversity and so forth, but also equally, we've got a responsibility to our family consumer. And Sun and Sand Sports is really making sure that sports can be quite intimidating. Sports can be very competitive. And that's great. But we also believe that, we want to create an environment for our consumers that's less intimidating. So Sun and Sand Sports is about that. Our hashtag is fun to the finish line. We want to bring the joy and we want to bring the fun to sports. We want people just to participate. So, we also understand that we're operating in certain countries whereby it's a very high pressure academically, right, with certain communities. We want to be that gateway to inspire and get the youth excited about sports. So that's on the one side. And then, of course, if you look at where we see ourselves from a geographical perspective, in 2010, we were basically serving the communities of UAE. Today we have access to a population of over 600 million with our new positioning of where we now are operating. And that comes with a big responsibility. So, so well-being, we know since post-pandemic, the awareness around well-being, I don't believe, certainly in my lifetime, has ever been more relevant today than it has.
Yes.
And therefore, we have a strong commitment and responsibility to bring the right product, the right consumer experience to each one of those geographies through the brands that we operate, and we're proud to partner with that.
Your answer has triggered me to ask you two new questions. One may have been on the agenda for today, but there's another one that kind of triggered me in terms of interest for the audience that would be listening to us today. I'll start with the one on partnerships. I understand GMG has had partnerships that have gone back to the initial stages of its inception, such as Nike. And since then, I believe GMG has evolved with partnerships with many different brands. If I read the news properly, even lately, we've been further expanding with people like, or organizations rather than people like VF Corp and Nike as well within Asia. What do you believe makes it such a successful story for GMG to have such long-standing partnerships?
Well, I think it's about how do we complement that partnership. I think that ultimately we're not ignorant to what we have to deliver as a partner. So recently, if you look at our partnership in Malaysia and Singapore as the Nike franchise partner, one of our first commitments as a partner was in collaboration with Nike to bring a flagship store like the Orchard Road store. The region needed that brand door. You're talking about the largest Nike store in Asia Pacific and Latin America.
Yeah, I heard.
And equally allows us to also bring a certain, strength in terms of our retail capability. We've been retails at the core and at the heart of what we do for over 40 years. And that is where we can complement as a proud to partner company. So, that's just the one part. I mean, we talk about Nike in Singapore, but then also, we're also not ignorant to, we just spoke about consumer obsession.
Yes.
right? And in order to obsess the consumer, we've got to make sure we're confident with the brands that we partner with, that we bring the right product. So while we have Sun and Sand Sports that's very family consumer focused, we've got obviously the Nike piece, but then we're not ignorant to the youth. And the youth has got a high drive for the athleisure industry. And recently just partnered with JD Sports. So, we're very proud to have opened our first JD store last week, with many more still to come. But that allows us the empowerment to make sure that we're partnering with the best. And I think that's very important, particularly with our CEO. Our CEO is young, he's dynamic, but also he really has a very clear vision in terms of his responsibility as our CEO, as a well-being organization, to partner with the best. And then by partnering with the best, that means we also have to be the best.
100%.
And that's what we are very focused on.
And that takes me back to the previous question where I said we've branched out into another question that occurred to me. I know now we've moved on from the subject of the pandemic, but I do believe in relation to the subject of sports, and now you're talking about consumer. Do you believe that the pandemic has reshaped the consumer mindset to the subject of well-being and hence an impact on sports as a lifestyle as well as a business?
Absolutely. It's had a double effect, so to speak. So if you look at people's awareness to live a more healthier lifestyle, whether that be walking, I have referenced my mother. My mother, she even hikes, and my mother wouldn't even know what a mountain looked like. So, so if you even bring it closer to home, you can see the shift that's happened since the pandemic, in terms of people's health awareness. But that's on the performance side. On the athleisure side, you've got movements like work from home. People's way of dressing and leaning on the athleisure industry, there's been a positive impact on that. So you look at it from the one perspective of, we operate performance-driven concepts like Sun and Sands that, like I said earlier, we want to really tap into that, bringing the fun part of sports and providing the right product. On the other hand, it's the athleisure piece. It's the comfort. It's the way that, you work from home, you're dressing differently. Even the way people dress in the office post-pandemic has changed.
Oh, yeah.
It has changed significantly.
Heels have gone.
Heels have gone, sneakers are in, right?
Yes.
So, and that's not going to slow down. So, we definitely are confident that, we are, in a very dynamic, exciting industry that has a role to play in keeping that momentum.
Do you believe so? So if you see now in the luxury world, suddenly sneakers are everywhere. And as we all know, sneakers could be athleisure, but fundamentally, it's initiated by sports.
Yes.
Do you believe they've tapped into our industry, or do you believe we've grown ours by being able to widen the mindset of fashion being an athleisure?
No, I think that at the end of the day, I think it's basically just once again reinforcing the importance of the athleisure industry and what it's doing as an influencer. Right.
Yeah.
I think it's really influencing a lot more. But I think more importantly, I think what's happening in the sporting industry is the fact that while we recognize the importance of the global brands that's, been around for many decades, I believe the shift post the pandemic has also opened up an opportunity for other challenger brands. It's getting more and more dynamic, but I think that's healthy. I think everything stems from product innovation.
100%.
And, if you don't have those robust challenger brands, the consumer doesn't benefit from brands stepping up in terms of product innovation, in terms of how they're enhancing their consumer experiences, how they're innovating around their retail concept formats, how they're serving the online, offline consumer. It's going to get more and more demanding by default, but that's a good thing because that's where evolution comes in.
No, I totally resonate. I myself have always lived with heels, and I've just dropped them. I haven't given them up. They're still there in my cupboard somewhere. But I do genuinely believe that today it's just more comfortable to take your sneakers wherever it is that you go. But with that, obviously, I'm not the only player living that lifestyle. I've seen that as a general shift, global shift, actually. How do you believe that the different portfolio of brands that GMG carries allows the organization to capitalize on the different formats in which the sports industry covers?
I mean, again, it's a good question, but it links back to who we partner with. So if you look at, again, you just recently mentioned earlier about some of our partnerships. I mentioned JD. We have other proud to partner brands that we are very committed to in terms of part of our important expansion program. Within the VF Corp portfolio, you look at the likes of the North Face, you look at our partnership with Columbia, for example. We've seen a shift over the last 2 to 3 years where families, social gatherings, a lot of it's happening outdoor. We were caught up in lockdowns over the pandemic. So another reference to the pandemic, but it did shift behavior thereafter. Not just the well-being, but active lifestylers benefiting from the outdoors. that really complements our brand portfolio. So if you look at the likes of Malaysia, where we're going through our expansion program, you've got over 3,300 hiking trails, for example,
Wow.
right? So our commitment to build community and to really inspire our communities to get onto to the mountain and hike, and then of course equip them with the right brands that we carry. That's a huge responsibility of GMG and complements our well-being positioning. So so that's another example whereby through Proud to Partner, we're also not just partnering with everyone. We're partnering with who we know is going to really complement that journey that we're on.
We have spoken about expansions. Spoken about decades of GMG operating under the sports world, let's say. I see more and more brands coming on and more markets, obviously. How far do you think GMG can take this in the next 3 to 5 years? What do you believe GMG's landscape can look like?
Well, the great thing about GMG, and if I look at the vision of our CEO, vision and commitment's one thing, but when you really demonstrate walking the talk, it's a whole different confidence as of today of where we're going to go. And I'll give you an example of that. In 2016, I remember our CEO talking very confidently about GMG's responsibility in terms of, not just in our home territories, but how we were going to expand. And there was two specific regions that he mentioned in 2016. And one of them was, of course, Southeast Asia. And the other one was Africa. And I can assure you, majority of the leaders at that particular time did not have the belief. But the vision was there and the confidence was there. Well, let me tell you, March 2021, in the heart of the pandemic, I was in quarantine in Singapore where we took over 200 stores in Southeast Asia. Equally, within that time frame, we've set up our Cairo office. We're now expanding close to 100 stores in Egypt. And really, for me, the reason why I say that is because if you reflect back over the last few years, our expansion over these regions has not been just on the spot. This has been embedded in the business in terms of the vision and the strategy of GMG. So when you ask me where we're going in the next 5 years, well, I can assure you our CEO is only getting started for one. And he's also supported by a leadership team that really thrives off that vision and ambition. So Africa, we are using Egypt as our gateway, but we are there to conquer. We want to really go into Africa. We believe that there's many countries in Africa that's not elevating the retail to where it should be. We know confidently we have the capability to step into these territories and provide the consumers with, the brands that we partner with, or our own brands. We're already doing it now in Southeast Asia, as I mentioned earlier. Southern Sand Sports is already in Indonesia, Singapore, and Malaysia. For example, we operate today in 4 countries in that territory. In the next 3 months, we'll be going into 2 more additional territories with Vietnam and Philippines. So it's not even as far as 3 years. In the next 3 months, we're already entering into 2 new countries.
Wow.
So there really is no stopping us. And also, I think the core of our success story and our executive board's success story has been, they've never moved away from their core strength. They've always expanded on their core strengths. And I've seen so many other organizations that try to diversify too wide and lost their way. Sports retail, for example, is in our DNA. It's in our blood in GMG.
See, with all this growth, there's obviously an inspiration. But do you believe this inspiration also cascades in terms of growth and expansion into our people? Do you believe that our people see what's in it for them also to be part of an organization that has such a global presence?
We are a family-run organization, and that cascades down as a culture in our organization. People is the absolute, as I said earlier at the beginning of this podcast, people is ultimately our number one priority. So, if you look at how we're expanding across the territories, a big part of what motivates GMG is the opportunity that's going to provide for our internal talent. I spoke earlier about some of the success stories, but it doesn't just stop there. I mean, our vice president of the Asia territory actually, he joined us as a buyer and has successfully grown. Our global VP of retail concept and space planning joined us as a space planning manager. So already you start to see that across geographies, our internal talent is already being able to grow with the organization. And then there's a much wider commitment. Then it's the commitment investing in local talent. So if you look at our general manager of Indonesia, she started with us, as a buyer. Today she is the general manager of that geography. So it's very important that the point that I'm making is that we will leverage off the strengths we have at our Dubai hub, but we're also not ignorant to our importance of really nurturing and growing talent at a local level. We sit in Saudi Arabia. Our area manager today in Saudi Arabia is our general manager of the country. So, absolutely, to answer your question, people is at the forefront of our priority. And what I most recognize about GMG with so many growth companies, it's not always the same case in every company. In
100%.
our organization, I can proudly tell you our talent that invest, that deliver the results, truly grows with this organization. And for me, that is why it's an organization I wake up to every day feeling the way I do, because while it's not the easiest industry we're in, let's also not sugarcoat that. But when you know that you put in the hour and you deliver the results and you stand by the organization, you then get the recognition. That's certainly a company that I want to invest my future into. And that, I think, sets a very strong legacy for currently the 13 countries, but the other countries we're going to go into.
I mean, look, I understand one of GMG's biggest taglines is Born to Win. I have most certainly felt that coming through our conversation today. It has not only been insightful, but genuinely very inspiring to understand that an organization can have such great focus, determination for growth in a subject that can only add value to any consumer's life. So it has been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today, Carl. Upwards and onwards and upwards, as they actually say.
Absolutely. No stopping
And
us.
no stopping GMG. I can see that. Good luck to you and to the entire team, and of course to GMG as well.
Thank you so much, Razan.
Stay tuned while we cover a lot more interesting topics in our future episodes of People and Purpose.